From the crossroads of the Ozarks, it's PID Radio. Welcome. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I am Sharon Gilbert. And you know this literally is Crossroads.
Yeah.
That's the name of this little
Geological
area.
Survey, this little unincorporated area, Crossroads. That's where we live, which is
consists
rather
of
appropriate.
What?
Us
gas
in the bait
station.
shop.
Yeah.
A couple of neighbors. Firehouse.
Firehouse.
Yeah. The
Does it
U-Story
include that
place.
little church on the other side?
I think so. Yeah. There's a little Pentecostal church over there.
So it's a great little area.
Yeah. So we are honored to be here and honored that you've chosen to join us. And thank you for so doing. You can download our free mobile app, which brings all of our content, not just this program, but our weekly Bible study, Unraveling Revelation, the Bible's Greatest Mysteries, A View from the Bunker, and Sharon's new podcast, The Armored Sheep.
Yeah, the Armored Sheep. We are all part of the Lord's flock. And if you call him your Savior, if you're written down the Lamb's Book of Life, then you are indeed one of his sheep.
Yeah.
And because of Ephesians 6, we see that we have armor. So why
That's
not
right.
be armored up, sheep?
That little armored sheep. And you can get yourself an Armored Sheep coffee mug or sweatshirt, t-shirt, cap, PID Radio merchandise now. We've got GHTV. We need to work on View from the Bunker
We
stuff.
really do. We need to get that. But here's the thing. Derek and I don't make any money on this. We don't want to make any money on this. We want all proceeds to go to Kenny C. and Gidget Manning. They're the ones that do all of this stuff.
Right.
The links at our website go to them. Light Hive Creations is their company name. And their profits go to help young musicians buy instruments.
Yeah, Kenny's a world-class musician, and he's teaching and sharing the gift of music,
sharing the gospel.
And sharing the gospel and demonstrating how you can learn to play, really awesome guitar, but then also use that instrument to praise our Lord and Savior, planting seeds for the next generation, and the proceeds for not just to our merchandise, but they have demonstrated, this is high quality stuff. Skywatch TV now uses them for Skywatch TV merchandise. Doug Van Dorn for his Giant Steps podcast, Vicki Joy Anderson and others. And you can, again, when you go through our store, gilberthouse.org/store, follow the link. You see the smiling face of Kenny C there modeling a GHTV t-shirt. Click that link. That'll take you to their store. And again, the proceeds they use.
The floating Kenny C.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. They airbrushed out his legs, so it looks like he's just, levitating. You use the proceeds to help students whose parents can't afford instruments for them to get their own instruments. Like you were telling me the story about the 8-year-old boy who'd saved up all his money to get himself a bass guitar.
I think his name's Griff, and I believe he may now have a bass again, but he saved up his whatever money he could earn. And when you're 8 years old, you can't earn a whole lot of money, but he saved long enough that he was able to buy his own bass guitar. Don't know if it's new or used, but then it was crushed terribly in an accident, so he lost his bass. Well, I think he's got one now, but this is the kind of gift you can give through buying at Light Hive Creations. You get a great product and you help the future of Christendom. Learn some music.
Yeah.
You may even be helping a future Casper McLeod.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Or Doug Van Dorn, who himself is taking music lessons over the internet from Kenny. Yeah.
He wants to be Casper McLeod.
That's true.
Sorry, Doug.
Most of us do, but...
Don't we, though?
You can't...
If
hair.
my hair could be like Casper's.
That would be awesome.
No, never happened.
Well, anyway, that again, gilberthouse.org/store. And we'll tell you about some other stuff, our Israel tour, and where you can get streaming video of our teachings and our travelogumentaries. Instant access in full HD before the end of the program. But we got a lot to talk about today.
Oh, boy, howdy.
Oh, boy. I'll tell you, the first month and a half of Donald Trump's...
40 days.
Yeah. 40 days. Wasn't that a song, Johnny Horton, back in the day?
I don't know. Probably.
I'll have to look that up.
But 40 days.
Seemed to me that was one of Dad's 45s that he used to play back in the day.
It's a very biblical number. In 40 days, Donald Trump has done more than most presidents could do in 40 years.
Yeah, he certainly has done more. Well, I shouldn't say more, but let's say he's done more productive things than we've seen in the previous administration, certainly during his first term. And I think a lot of that had to do with Trump coming in. He won the election because he's got a natural instinct for what will work with people. And so as a politician, he's got some instincts that led him to do unconventional things that really worked. Got him elected to the shock and surprise of Hillary Clinton. But then when he got to Washington, he realized, okay, I don't really know the players here. So he was open to being guided and directed. And so the swamp said, here, come, follow us. We'll tell you what you need to do.
Grima Wormtongue sat there and told him what to do.
Right. And
but
so
those 4 years in between, he had learned a lot in the first administration, and he made plans.
He did. And I think Democrats regret not letting him win in 2020 because those plans meant that he had time to vet people who would join him in the next administration. He had time to strategize. Okay, here's what we're going to do to cut the legs out from underneath the deep state. Whether that's successful yet, we don't know. And we'll talk about an example of maybe not quite yet. There's more work to be done here in a minute. But he has certainly thrown the deep state back on its heels. And I don't think they expected him to come in and act as quickly as he has. It's helped that he's gotten his cabinet in place so quickly. That didn't happen very quickly the first time around.
That to me is a miracle. And it's another sign that the Lord's hand is upon President Trump. I am not saying President Trump is a believer and everything he does is going to be a perfect Christian act. Nah, first of all, there is no perfect Christian. But second of all, no matter what his relationship is with the Lord, he is in the Lord's hands. He may not be a believer in God, but he is certainly God's man for now.
Yeah.
The Lord raised him up for purposes.
Yeah.
Just as he's used many in the past, many world leaders in the past, whether they knew they were being used or not. Cyrus is an example.
Right. As we mentioned in other programs, that God, almost 200 years before Cyrus came to power as the king of the Persians and the Medes, he was called out by name by the prophet Isaiah, or through the prophet Isaiah by God. And God said, though you do not know me, speaking to Cyrus, that God was going to use him, called him his anointed, his Messiah, though you do not know me. Now, that didn't mean he was the Messiah in the sense of Jesus being the Messiah, but he was anointed for a time to return the Jews to Israel. To Judea at that point. That was what was left of Israel. What's really interesting is that historians have noted that they know from surviving records and archives that Cyrus sent the idols representing all the gods of Mesopotamia back home.
Right.
Because
it wasn't only the Jews, right? It was a political move by Cyrus, who was a very astute politician. He had just won the war over Nabonidus, the last king of the Chaldeans, the ruler of Babylon. And prior to that final battle, Nabonidus had brought the idols from all of their patron cities in Mesopotamia into Babylon, thinking that somehow this would give Babylon the protection of, say, the moon god was brought in from Ur, and the sun god was brought in from Sippar, and Inanna, the Saxon war goddess, was brought in from Uruk. And those cities then were, the citizens of those cities thought that they were left without protection. So Cyrus very astutely said, we will send your gods back to you. And in his mind, he was just sending Yahweh back to Jerusalem. Well, those Jews are a little weird. They don't have an idol representing Yahweh, but okay, fine, we'll send them back anyway. Doesn't matter. God saw that this was going to happen 200 years in advance and said that he was being used for that purpose. So Cyrus thought he was doing something completely different. Doesn't matter. He was a pagan, polytheist. God said, you don't know me, but I'm still using you. Very much so. Isn't it interesting that I think the alternate way of spelling and pronouncing Cyrus's name is Koresh?
Yes, exactly.
And that's why David Koresh named himself that. Yep,
and the Koresh tribe was the tribe from which Muhammad came in the 7th century AD. So David Koresh may have looked at that as his inspiration, one or the other. But you're right, though. It is the same name that was applied over the period of more than 1,000 years, because Cyrus, 6th century BC, Muhammad, 7th century AD. So, yeah, very interesting stuff. Well, let's see. Do you want to start with Zelensky or with the Epstein files?
Let's start with little Z, because that's all over X today. I've been calling Zelensky little Z because he just portrayed himself that way.
Yeah.
He made himself look smaller and smaller with every time he opened his mouth.
Yeah.
You don't show up you don't show up to a bank interview where you're wanting to get a loan,
right,
or get money, or work out a deal,
or a grant application,
or whatever, after you've already essentially played the bank 2 or 3 times in a row, because Zelensky allegedly agreed to this mineral deal, and then he backed out. Then he agreed, then he backed out. Then he agreed, and he was going to Washington to sign.
Yeah.
But what I read a couple of days ago is that Trump said to him, don't come. Because Trump believed that he was going to once again back down. And he didn't want that to be what happened, and yet it's what happened.
Right.
And Zelensky allegedly went to Macron and said, can you go to bat for me with President Trump? I really want to be there. I think that Zelensky, little Z, whether he did it on his own or was persuaded to do it, and you can talk about that in a minute, went into that thinking, I'm going to go in, guns a-blazing, metaphorically speaking, and win the day. That didn't work out, did it, little Z?
No, and I would say that what we saw on TV yesterday, and I'm really glad that Trump has been, here's the other thing, Donald Trump, in his first 40 days, has given the press more access to him to ask questions and to see things happening in real time than Joe Biden gave in 4 years. That's not an exaggeration.
Oh, I agree.
And it was deliberate. And by the way, I think it's hilarious that one of the main purveyors of the Joe Biden is just as sharp as he ever was lie, Jake Tapper of CNN, the most trusted name in news, just wrote a book called
Allegedly,
Original Sin.
we have to say.
Yeah, allegedly. As ever, we have to say, allegedly. Jake Tapper just wrote a book called Original Sin, investigating the media for how it covered up and why it covered up Biden's cognitive decline.
Oh, I know, and I'm raising my hand because, look, you and I both know that manuscripts don't just emerge overnight.
No.
They take some research, they take some interviewing when you're doing something like that, and it takes a while to write it out. Either this was ghostwritten, or he's been writing this for a couple of years.
Yeah, and just pops it out less than 2 months, and it's published less than 2 months, because the printing process, as we've now learned, can take up to 6 months once you get it to the printer.
Editing process.
Right. So this was probably completed sometime last year.
Yeah, because it's more than just going through and dotting I's and crossing T's and editing. In this case, it's legal.
Yeah.
You have to make sure that what he says isn't going to get the publisher in trouble.
Yep. So anyway, bringing this back around to what we saw in the Oval Office, the point is that Biden was protected from the press even back during the 2020 campaign. Of course, they used the COVID lockdowns as the excuse, but it was because they knew that under scrutiny, as we saw in the debate last June with Trump, what we could all plainly see, Joe Biden was not all there. And it's not, it's not his fault. He's undergoing dementia. It was elder abuse, what he was put through.
Yes, exactly.
But the deep state wanted an empty suit in the Oval Office that they could manipulate to get what they wanted, which included funding this war against Russia, using Ukraine as proxies for the war. Now, Zelensky and his wife, they're making out just fine. And sadly, the people who are paying the price are the young men and women of Russia and Ukraine and all the volunteers who chose to go over there and fight.
Little Z and his wife just had a photo spread done for, I think, Vogue.
Yeah.
Who in the middle of a war has Vogue come in and photograph you for a slick layout?
Yep.
And I'm not talking, him looking rugged, sitting in the bunker or whatever. No. These were very back in his entertainer days, kind of, headshot kind of things where he's looking all cool. This is what I'm going to submit for my next, audition to try to get the big job or the big movie role. I'm sorry, but if I were living in Ukraine right now, I would be horrified. And indeed, they are. Some of them, they want him out because frankly, there was supposed to have been an election last year.
Well, yeah, Zelensky's term in office expired last May, but they canceled elections using a national state of emergency as the excuse.
Oh, yeah.
So when Trump called him a dictator without elections, an unelected dictator, he was not wrong.
It was not hyperbole.
And yet,
right.
And yet, the political opposition here in the United States, Democrats and the Never Trump Republicans, and the European Union have just been, they lost their flippin' minds over what happened in the Oval Office yesterday. If you haven't seen the video, look on YouTube, look on social media, you can find it. There is a 5-minute, really at the end of the discussion, the last 5 minutes, but there's like 45 minutes leading up to that where they're discussing this, that, and the other. But it's when they get down to the last 5 minutes where it's clear that Trump is saying, well, look, we need peace. We need to cease fire. And Zelensky starts losing his temper.
And calls him names. Well,
He called J.D. Vance. Yeah, Vice President Vance. He used words we will not use here.
Not at all, but
he
you
said
can
them in
find
Ukrainian, but there are people who speak Ukrainian who have access to the internet who translated.
You'll see the translation if you turn on your closed captions. No, this is horrendous behavior. And I think Trump was, first of all, as you say, to have it done in front of the press.
Yeah.
Little Z, I think Zelensky thought he was going to come in and have a private meeting. He wore his typical fatigues, which he seems to wear everywhere, just about.
Right.
Not always.
Just to emphasize that I'm a wartime president.
That's just it. But he was there to help move the everything towards peace. You don't wear your war outfit to negotiations that are supposed to lead to peace.
Yeah, and Trump commented on that. I saw when he was getting out of the limousine, he said, "Oh, nice outfit, nice clothes, like your clothes."
And he even said, "You didn't even bother to wear a suit to this."
Yeah.
Why didn't you wear a suit to this?
Right. There was a post on X, formerly Twitter, yesterday prior to the meeting.
I think formerly Twitter, we're past those days.
You're probably right. On X yesterday, especially now that Musk has risen to such a, we didn't elect him. Well, we elected Trump, and Trump ran with him. So, yeah, we kind of did vote for this.
Look, you don't elect most of the people who are part of a new administration.
And the
they
bureaucrats
are appointed.
Right. And the bureaucrats who are squawking that, how dare he do this? It's like, look, you're under the executive branch. He has the right to,
exactly.
govern.
And you bureaucrats, you're part of the bureau because you were appointed at
Yeah, you're not elected.
Or hired at some point. You weren't elected.
Yeah. The blob in London, the deep state in the United States.
They are not
the swamp.
elected.
The blob and the swamp.
Yeah.
But they like to think that they run the government. And sadly, to a great degree, they have. Anyway, there was a post to X yesterday morning before the meeting at the White House by Senator Chris Murphy, Democrat from Connecticut, who showed a photo of him and some other senators sitting and talking to Zelensky and telling, according to Senator Murphy, basically counseling him to go in and firmly and be assertive and so forth. It's like, well, yeah, how'd that work out for you? You're basically telling a beta male to go in and attack an alpha male.
I know.
And that just does not work out well.
No.
Now, you look, Christians, listen to this. I understand why many Christians are a little, put off by Donald Trump's past history of personal behavior. We didn't vote a pastor-in-chief into the White House.
No, we did not.
If you thought that that's what we were trying to do, then you might as well never vote for a presidential candidate ever again, because that's just not going to happen.
We're part of a kingdom.
Right.
Our leader is a king.
We're just voting for somebody who is going to execute the laws of the land according to the strictures of the Constitution. And if you think somehow we're going to vote Jesus into the White House, then allow us to disabuse you of that notion.
Well, I think if we were to vote, quote unquote, Jesus into the White House, that would be the Antichrist.
I agree with you.
Now, I am not saying that is Trump. Not at all. I frankly don't believe that, because he's way too divisive.
Right.
The Antichrist is going to be loved by all, pretty much. But if you are expecting to change the world by your vote, no. You change the world by lifting up Christ.
Yeah.
And you won't be popular for doing that.
No. The other problem with thinking that we can put Jesus in the White House or on the Supreme Court, and we've already seen this to a degree with his appointment of Paula White Cain to head up the White House Office of Faith. She herself is a divisive figure. And it's because there are Christians of various denominations who either like her or really don't like her. And then we're all arguing over, well, it should be a Calvinist, an Arminian, a preterist, whatever.
Look, there is no one who could fill that role that would make everybody happy.
Right. What we want is a president and an administration that just leaves us alone. Adhere to the constitutional, the First Amendment to the Constitution, that Congress shall make no law regarding the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof.
Right. But no, there is no way that any of our votes will ever put Jesus into the White House. What we are told to do is to pray for our leaders because the Lord raises them up for his reasons. But if we're told to pray for them so that we might live peaceable lives. Right.
And that office requires, frankly, it requires an alpha personality, male or female. You require somebody who's going to sit down with a world leader, as he did with Macron. And Macron, grabbed him and interrupted him, and Trump was like, well, okay, if you want to believe that, fine with me. But with Zelensky, and basically telling him, you've come into this office, you've disrespected the United States of America. Without us, you would have no chance at all to win this war, and now you're coming in here and demand. And I think the Democrats who are screaming about this, the media, oh, this was reprehensible, this is humiliating, how could the president treat a foreign leader? Ukraine, we stand with you. Look, we stand with the people of Ukraine as well. And I think so does Donald Trump. It's just he's saying the way we stand with you is by stopping the killing so you don't lose any more people.
Right.
You're not going to win the war.
You will never win this war, but Zelensky wants an endless war.
He does. Zelensky was acting like a sales rep for the military-industrial complex.
Bing! That's it. That's exactly what he's been doing.
Who's got quarterly sales goals that he needs to hit, and he's trying to close the deal. Now, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent told Laura Ingraham on Fox News last night, and he confirmed what you had said earlier, that this is the third time that that Zelensky has backed out on signing the mineral rights deal. Trump's making the case, look, we signed this deal, suddenly we have a vested economic interest in protecting Ukraine. Russia will back off, but look, you're not going to get the Crimea back. You're not going to get the Donbass back. You had a chance 3 years ago. In fact, Sergei Lavrov said this in Doha, Qatar, on Friday, that they were within an hour 3 years ago of signing the Minsk Accords that would have ended the war 3 years ago. But then Boris Johnson showed up in Kyiv and said, "Don't you sign that? Don't you sign that?" And he was there with Joe Biden's blessing to say, "We'll back you to the hilt." But what they were really saying is, we'll fight to the last Ukrainian. We're not going to send our soldiers. And I started and then I rabbit trailed on this point. Democrats forgot that Joe Biden cussed out Zelensky on a phone call.
Oh, yeah.
Because Zelensky had, they had just sent Zelensky something like $50 billion, and Zelensky started asking for more. And Biden, whose language was pretty salty when the cameras weren't running, basically called him out for being an ingrate. And so what Trump did is nothing that Biden didn't already do once. It's just that Trump did it in front of cameras and Biden did it off camera.
Right. And the other thing to remember is that the dotted lines forming the country of Ukraine as we know it haven't always existed. They're relatively new.
Yep.
The Donbass has been traditionally Russian. Crimea belonged to Russian people.
Yep.
Crimea was part of Russia in the 19th century. It's where a lot of the Crimean War took place.
Hence the name.
Sevastopol was one of the big sites of fighting. And nobody won in that war. And in this one, nobody's winning.
That is exactly right. Ukraine is barely 31 years old this year. It was 94 when Ukraine became an independent state. And at the time, it had a lot of Russia's nuclear arsenal, nuclear missiles. They returned them to Russia, and Russia agreed to allow all of this to take place. Ukraine kept the nuclear power plants, which generated the power for Ukraine, but also a substantial portion of the neighboring regions in Russia. And at the time, NATO had agreed not to expand eastward. which of course NATO then promptly did, adding Poland and Romania and the Baltic states, and it's just...
Well, in 2008, there were breakaway regions that Putin was trying to, well, frankly, bring under the Russian umbrella during the time of Bush. 2000, yeah, it was 2008.
George W. Bush. That was in northern Georgia, right?
Yes.
Abkhazia and South Ossetia.
And it happened while Bush Jr. was in China at the Chinese Olympics.
Right.
It was like, okay,
August of 2008.
Everybody's over there looking at the Olympics, I'll just do this. And I don't agree with invasions. I really don't. But if you cannot agree peaceably behind the scenes through diplomacy on, okay, this actually did used to belong to us, this should belong to us, this actually now belongs over here. Okay, you agreed that you wouldn't put missiles here. You're threatening me by putting missiles here. Do you understand how I feel? Remember the Cuban Missile Crisis where you got mad at Khrushchev?
Right.
Because he was putting missiles in
90
Cuba?
miles off the coast of Florida.
Exactly.
Right. Yep.
So there have been a lot of things going on that, frankly, Russia sees itself as on the defensive position, not offensive.
Right. So Trump has said no to NATO membership to Ukraine. And because NATO has to unanimously approve new applications, that means at least until the next president comes in. And at this point, if the election was today, it'd be J.D. Vance. Oh, man.
I know it. Well, let's just pray he keeps going the way he is. But Ursula von der Leyen has gone on the record as of this morning saying, oh, President Zelensky, we're backing you all the way. We're
Queen
so
Ursula,
sorry.
yeah.
Yeah, Queen Ursula is the way to put it, too.
I also saw that the chief foreign minister for the EU, and I can't remember her name, but she said that there needs to be a new leader of the free world. It's like, well, okay, Europe, go ahead, do it.
Carry on. Then you put in most of the money for NATO.
Exactly.
The US
you put up the soldiers there to defend Eastern Europe.
Exactly.
Our boys are coming home to defend our southern border. How about that? Well, yeah, that's not going to work out very well. As Trump has pointed out, Lieutenant Colonel Robert McGinnis has written about this. The United States has carried the burden for defending Europe since the end of World War II. And in the immediate aftermath of World War II, you can understand that. But as time went by, as Germany, France once again regained their economic strength, the United Kingdom, which is not part of the EU anymore, but we'll see how long that lasts.
Keir Starmer, look, just replace that guy.
Yeah.
He is not doing you any favors.
We'll talk about his meeting at the White House here in a bit. But anyway, the United States has continued to bear that burden. And I think, again, in large part, it's because the military-industrial complex benefits because we have to buy the food that those soldiers need, which, by the way, not to rabbit trail too much here, but one of the things that has been uncovered by some of the audits that have been ongoing now is that that money that is being deducted from the paychecks of soldiers on our military bases to pay for food, most of it's not being spent on their food. It's going into the general fund.
What?
I don't have the story in front of me, but it's a majority of it. It's like 60% of the money that was being withdrawn, soldiers who are living on base, the lower ranking enlisted soldiers.
Right. But how's the food being paid for?
Well, soldiers complain that this food is, the ingredients are fresh, it doesn't taste good, there's not,
Oh, I see.
And so they're buying pizzas or whatever. And so the bases are saying, well, the soldiers aren't eating here, so we'll just take the money, we'll just put, which came first, the chicken or the egg, the bad food or the soldiers eating off base?
Yeah,
but the bottom line is whatever the base commander wants to spend it on, apparently, because it's not being tracked. Just like the, $4.7 trillion that DOJ found in Treasury Department disbursements that aren't tracked because they aren't categorized.
It's like petty cash.
Right, exactly. It's a slush fund. So sadly, our soldiers aren't being treated the way they're supposed to be treated. They're getting money docked from their pay that's supposed to go to the food that they're being served in the mess halls, and it's not. Most of it is not, anyway. This is a fundamental redrawing of the maps in Europe, where the United States has essentially been paying for keeping those lines where they are but Russia has an industrial capacity that exceeds that of the United States, even though their GDP is much, much smaller, like 1/15 of the U.S. GDP, I've read. And yet they can manage to keep their artillery units supplied with shells, whereas we are burning through our stocks of ammunition faster than we can manufacture replacements, because we have offshored our industrial capacity. We don't have companies that can do metal fabrication and machining anymore.
Okay, we are part of NATO, well, and the G7, whereas Russia is part of BRICS.
Yeah.
So they have partner countries, partner nations that can help them with that manufacturing.
China, yep. Yep. India to a certain degree.
Iran?
Iran, yeah, not so much, but Russia is
They're
still...
making drones.
They're making drones, but they don't have the kind of heavy industrial capacity to make, tanks, armored personnel carriers,
I suppose that's true.
ammunition, especially. And really the big difference on the battlefield in Ukraine has been artillery, where the Russians can just pound Ukrainian military defensive positions with artillery and they just roll over them. The Donbass is essentially lost.
Yeah, I know.
Ukraine's not going to get it back. And for you, coming back to Zelensky, for him to come into the White House and demand that the United States keep writing checks for a war that is lost. Ukraine doesn't have the manpower. And even if the United States would commit all of our industrial capacity to defending Ukraine, much less, forget about supplying our own units. I mean, to give you an idea how bad things are here in the United States, one Chinese shipyard, and they've got something like 50, one Chinese shipyard can produce more ships than all U.S. shipyards combined.
Before Trump won the election, as it looked like he was going to win, you and I were talking about what did it mean for Christianity, what did it mean for the world. And one thing that I said was that my theory had always been that Biden's job was to get us into a war.
Yes.
And Trump's job, according to the left, okay, we'll let him win, and that way he can take the fall for the wars that Biden started. I don't know if Trump saw it that way, but he's turning that around, and he wants peace.
Yeah.
He does not want to continue these wars. He does not want them to erupt into World War III, which is what they were about to do, frankly, because of these various wars going on throughout different parts of the world that were going to all conglom together and end up with this third world war. Trump does not want that. He genuinely wants peace. And why does he want peace? Well, first of all, let's face it, a peaceful world is a better world for everybody in it. But a peaceful world is good for business.
Exactly. I was going to say that very thing. It's better for business. And that's what he's trying to do, make deals. If we can make a deal with Ukraine to get access to their mineral rights, then we've got rare earth metals. I mean, not huge amounts, but enough that it would certainly help with what we need for electronics. We keep them out at the hands of the Russians. Of course, the Russians have a lot of rare earth metals too. And to that end, the U.S. and Russian negotiators are talking about business deals.
Yes. And by the way, when Derek and I say it's good for business, that doesn't mean that that's what our driving ambition is. No, not at all. But that's what Trump is, a businessman.
Right.
And in some ways, maybe that's a good deal that we have a businessman in the Oval Office instead of a politician, because politicians get nothing done. No. They are serving the interests of businessmen. They're supporters.
Right, red businessmen. But sadly, the biggest business in the United States right now anyway is, well, there are two main things. Number one is oil. Number two is the military-industrial complex. And sadly, those two together, since World War II and President Eisenhower warned about this. This is where we get the phrase, the military-industrial complex. His farewell speech as president, they have driven U.S. foreign policy. Prior to World War II, it was, companies like United Fruit, sending the Marines into island nations in the Caribbean to put down rebellions against their policies and how they were basically, paying slave wages to workers there.
I think when outgoing President Biden was giving his last speech, someone wrote it in there, hoping to give him that final moment the way that Eisenhower had his with the military-industrial complex.
Yeah.
And Biden complaining about the oligarchs. You are an oligarch. You and all of your buddies are oligarchs.
Soros.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. You just gave Soros the Medal of Freedom, for goodness sake.
Right.
You don't do things like that and then think that a little bit of rhetoric as you go out is going to wash it all away.
What did he call it? The technology industrial complex?
Yeah, something like that.
Like, oh, come on. You guys are the ones who weaponized social media against anybody who dared challenge the narrative.
I know. Well, we need to take a break, but when we come back, there are a couple of things that I would like to touch on. One, of course, is the Epstein files.
Oh, yes.
But also, you were talking about redrawing maps. We've talked about the dotted lines on the map.
Yes.
Well, they're being redrawn in the Middle East.
We need to talk about that. So stick around. More to come on PID Radio.
In the days of old, giants walked the earth. Scripture tells how David defeated Goliath, how angels served the Creator, and how the serpent deceived God's image bearers. The prophecies foretold of a coming Savior, one that would reach across the veil and set the captives free. Featuring L.A. Mazzulli,
It's a suicide mission by the fallen angels.
Derek Gilbert,
UFO true believers, the ancient aliens prophets.
and Micah Van Huss
So in the story of the giant of Kandahar,
at the Mysteries of the Bible Verse event in Carmel, Indiana.
Shall we begin? Let's begin.
Welcome back to PID Radio. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm Sharon Gilbert, and we want to remind you, if you go to our website, gilberthouse.org, you're going to find a few things there. One, if you go to gilberthouse.org/app, you can find all the ways you can download our app to your mobile device or to your set-top box or smart TV. Also, if you're there and you go to /travel, you can find out when we're going to Israel next. And this year in October, we are going, as of the plans right now. And we have some announcements about that to make probably next time, but not today. Also, while you're there, you can go to the /store and you can find out how to buy those great things from Light Hive Creations, and also where you can stream our video content, or you can buy our books, because we're no longer shipping physical products from our barn anymore. We're reusing that space for something that we think is actually a better way of using the space, because there are lots of places to buy our stuff, including the Skywatch TV store.
Well, that is correct.
So lots of places there, and be sure to download the app.
Yeah. iOS, Android, Amazon Kindle Fire, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, and Apple TV, even Google TV and Android TV.
I knew you had that list memorized.
All of them places.
All of them.
Yes. So yes, do that. Also check out our we've got channels on Telegram now. We'll put links in the show notes below this. But we're also on Substack now. We've got a Substack account, gilberthouse.substack.com. And we've been posting articles there.
Every day.
Yeah, every day. Just trying to get caught up. Got a bunch of article-length excerpts from our books that we've been sharing over the last few years. So I thought, well, let's just put these out here on Substack. And right now, we're at 662 subscribers on the Substack.
Ooh.
Yeah, four more.
Let's get 5 more.
Yeah, let's get 5 more. We don't want to be the Substack of the beast.
5 more.
But the most recent article is about the return of the Rephaim, which is about the travelers. And the travelers mentioned in Ezekiel chapter 39 at the War of Armageddon. Yes. So all of that at gilberthouse.substack.com, our website, gilberthouse.org. Well,
So, which first, Epstein or let's do Epstein first.
yeah, apparently the dog ate the Epstein files. The FBI dog at the Southern District of New York, the U.S. Attorney's Office there in Manhattan, ate the Epstein files.
Yeah.
That appears to be the case there, and they just feel sick about it.
Well, if you've followed, look, I know not everyone wants an X account, but because you may think, well, I don't like Elon Musk. Well, find a technocrat that you're going to like. They're just not out there. The ones who are running these social media sites are technocrats that often they end in rat for a reason. The word, technocrat.
Yes.
Right. But I personally think that X is a great space to go on, because you there is very little silencing going on there.
Correct.
There was a time when there was a lot of silencing going on in X. You couldn't say certain things. Well, now Elon Musk has a rule that you get to say pretty much what you want to, so long as you aren't breaking the law, as in, I'm going to threaten you with this or that. So that you get a lot of swings of opinion, far left, far right, a lot of stuff in the middle. You can say pretty much what you want to and discuss what you want to. So I love X. It's a great place, though, to get the news. You go into X, into your account, and then you go to For You, which will tell me, say, it'll be local news around here, world news that X has figured out that I'm very interested in. And you can also see trending stories. So one of the things that's been trending there, and this isn't Epstein, but is that, and I know that I'm mentioning this because I know many of you are wondering if we were going to mention it, and that is that Pope Francis has been in the hospital for the last 2 weeks plus, about 15 days, I think. And as of yesterday, he aspirated some of his own vomit. When you're in there for pneumonia anyway,
that's really dangerous.
Is really life-threatening. So he was on a ventilator, and it was very touch and go yesterday. He made it through the night. So the bottom line is that Francis has been ill off and on for a couple of years. So it's possible that he is reaching the end of his life. Please pray for him. Please pray for him. Regardless of what your denomination is and how you may feel about the Catholic Church, he as an individual human being needs Christ. Whether or not he has a personal relationship with him or not, whether his name is written down in the Lamb's Book of Life, I don't know. But he may very soon cross through that door, so be praying for him. But I will say politically, when that day comes, whenever that is, there will be a scramble to decide who gets to take that top spot in the church. And that is its own country. The Pope controls a large portion of the world population.
There's a new movie that has come out. It was a movie or series called The Conclave.
Oh, yeah.
With Stanley Tucci and some other well-known actors. And very interesting that the timing of that came out. But of course, Pope Francis being 88 years old, it is, Ray Fiennes is part of it as well, is in it. It is a 2-hour, it's a 2-hour film. And
I've seen trailers. I haven't watched the film yet, though.
It would...
I hear some weeping in there.
Yeah.
I'll go let the dogs out. So if you hear me walking or you hear the dogs, that's
the reason for it. Yeah, we're using the wireless microphones in the house again. Again, just a concession to my mobility issues of late.
Hi, girls.
The plot.
You want to say hi to the people?
And there have been other dramatizations of the political machinations that take place behind the scenes of the Vatican. The reason we're mentioning this and bringing this up, and I said this on 5 and 10 for Skywatch TV this past week, as if you're listening to this program, there's probably a good chance that, I'd say there's a good chance that you are a Protestant or one of the Protestant denominations. We don't have any ill will.
Or a very conservative Catholic.
Or conservative Catholic. We don't have any ill will towards Roman Catholics. In fact, I don't talk about this often, but during my first marriage, I converted and became a Roman Catholic, which is interesting looking back on the day and thinking, how was it that I got to my late 20s and I didn't understand the fundamental differences between Protestants and Catholics?
You were never really discipled.
No, was not. I was raised Protestant. I was raised, in fact, when we moved out of Chicago during my high school years, we attended a Lutheran church. So, but Lutheran, at least the format of the Lutheran service then, I've not attended a Lutheran church in a long time, was not all that different from what I found in the Catholic Church parishes that I attended after I got married.
I think it depends on which synod of the Lutheran Church.
It does. But at least, and again, this is superficial, but that was my understanding of theology, 35, 40 years ago, was very superficial. So I understand that there are Roman Catholics, 'cause I met some, I knew some who understood that their salvation came by grace through faith in Jesus Christ. It was not through the performance of the sacraments and so on. And this is why Sharon says we should pray for Pope Francis, that just because he is the Pope, the leader of the largest Christian denomination on earth, doesn't mean he's necessarily saved, doesn't mean he's got that understanding of his salvation. But when we bring this up, it's only because out of the 2.3 billion Christians on planet Earth, 1.4 billion identify as Roman Catholic.
Yeah, over half.
So yeah, it's like 60% of the world's Christians identify as Roman Catholics. So whatever happens to the Pope will affect more than half of the people who call themselves Christian on planet Earth. There's a lot of property and a lot of money that is controlled by the Vatican as well. So it is, as you pointed out when we discussed this the other day, its own country. It is a sovereign nation. It has its own diplomatic corps. It has its own intelligence services.
Yeah, and while Pope Francis has been sort of not exactly in favor of the U.S. having a wall on its southern border, they've got a wall around the Vatican.
Yeah, Vatican City surrounded by...
They have guards.
Yeah, you don't just wander in there and get to set up, and camp in St. Peter's Square.
No, but we saw a camp set up next to Benjamin Netanyahu's house.
Yeah.
Yeah, guy sitting there just wanted to make his statement about the hostages. And nobody was running him off.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens there because, yes, there will be, in fact, I'm certain there are already deals being made behind the scenes for when the Pope goes. And in fact, it's entirely possible that Pope Francis is already meeting his eternal reward and it just has not been officially announced.
Well, that wouldn't be...
We're just speculating. We don't know that for a fact.
Well, allegedly, we have to say.
As ever.
Yeah, this is our opinion, but we don't know. That politically speaking, sometimes it is the most expedient thing to do to delay the announcement of the passing of a world figure until you have all of the things in place. And sometimes it has to do with funeral preparations, not just who's going to take his place. I remember when Queen Elizabeth II passed away, it wasn't announced until 6 or 6:30 in the evening, I think, UK time. But she had actually passed away several hours before.
Right.
So it took a while before the permission was given. And part of that is it had to be BBC who announced it. That was just the rule. Now, I don't know if that's going to change at some future point. But they were finally given the okay, and okay, now you can announce it. But a great world leader who, in this case, as you say, controls a large portion of the population of the world, who goes in there next, it's a big deal. And I'm sure that there have been political wranglings taking place and maybe even a few persuasive events. And when I say persuasive, I'm choosing that word very carefully.
Some arm twisting.
Arm twisting, that's another kind
Some
of way.
files being shared. Look, we know what you did.
Yeah. And speaking of files.
You will stand down, yes. Speaking of files, yes. This was the big nothing burger of the past week. One of the things that President Trump...
burger, no cheese and not even fries on the side.
President Trump made a promise when he came into office that the files on the assassinations of John F. Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy, and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. would be released, as well as whatever files were held regarding the Jeffrey Epstein case. You might remember Jeffrey Epstein was known to be a procurer of young women, underage women. His plane earned the nickname the Lolita Express, Lolita being the title of a
book where it's like a 12-year-old girl or something.
12-year-old girl, something like that, right. Lolita was just,
very young.
The implication being that Epstein, who owned his little island there off the coast of Florida, would go there and do things that were not
legal.
Yeah. And So Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, new Attorney General, had said this past week in interviews that she had the file on her desk and she was going through it, wanted to make sure that none of the victims had personal information or data revealed when those files were released. But she had promised, I think she said this on Jesse Waters' program on Fox News, that they were on her desk, they would be released on Thursday morning. Well, on Wednesday, a number of conservative alternative media hosts were invited to the White House. And according to Liz Wheeler, who is on Glenn Beck's Blaze TV network, young lady said later on X, explained what had happened. Because they went there was a photo op with a bunch of these folks holding up binders that said Epstein Files Release Phase 1. Mm-hmm. She said they were invited to the White House, but they weren't told why. It's just, the Attorney General and the Vice President would like to meet with you in the Oval Office tomorrow. Like, oh, okay. I suppose if we've got a summons like that, which is never going to happen. But yeah, but that would never happen. But if it were to happen, I suppose we'd call Eileen and say, "Can you watch the dogs for a few days?" And we would go. So they went. They found out when they got there that they were there to receive these binders. And then, according to Liz Wheeler, Attorney General Bondi said, "Now, this is not what you think it is. It's not what I thought it was when I was told. This is 200 pages of files, but quite frankly, these 200 pages are it's the information that was leaked previously that has already been on the internet for a while.
Yeah, a lot of it's redacted.
The flight logs, the names and other things, the same old lists that's already been out there. So this was a big nothing. And the people who were there, including Liz Wheeler, got kind of upset. It's like, wait a minute, you brought us here, you had the photo op, and now you're making it look like we're complicit in this big fraud that's been perpetrated. To me, and we discussed this the other day, this is like Geraldo Rivera breaking down that brick wall to open up Al Capone's vault, and there's nothing in there.
Yeah, well, I think Bondi was set up.
I think so too, because on Thursday afternoon then, she released a letter that she had written to the new director of the FBI, Kash Patel, and said, "I understand that these are being held at the FBI office in New York and possibly at the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York." That's Manhattan. That's the office that was going after Trump.
Oh, yeah.
And she demanded the 2,000 pages of documents and other information, which would mean like videos and audio recordings, because Epstein reportedly had his homes totally bugged. She demanded that those...
His big operation was blackmail.
Yes, blackmail of one sort or another, for his own enrichment or for intelligence, we don't know. We'll talk more about that in a second. But the bottom line is she gave a deadline of 8 a.m. Friday. Now, given that was like, I don't know, 16 hours in advance, from when she issued the letter to Kash Patel, that's not much time. It would almost seem like you'd need to take a team of trusted agents with you to New York, bust in the doors of the FBI office and the Southern District of New York U.S. Attorney's Office, and just say, okay, where are they? Show them, or you're coming out in handcuffs. That didn't happen. Bondi didn't get them. And of course, then little Z went into the Oval Office and suddenly everybody was talking about Zelensky. Nobody's talking about the Epstein files anymore.
I know, but I do think that the Epstein file topic will resurface very soon.
It will. So what do we make of all this? Well, who is protecting whom? I think the anger on the part of those alternative media hosts was that they felt like they were being used in what would appear to the American people as a cover-up by the Trump administration.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. After Trump had said, nope, we're going to release all this. And of course, when it came out, there were a few on the left who saw, hey, look, Trump is on the flight logs. Well, we already knew that. Trump had said, yeah, I flew on the plane once to get somewhere else. I didn't go to Epstein Island.
Right.
And it's also well known that when Epstein's reputation got to where it was like, we know that he's going after young women, and he was doing it at Mar-a-Lago. He was a party at Mar-a-Lago. Trump had him kicked out. And so Epstein, and this came out about a week and a half ago, his former cellmate, when he was in Manhattan, before Epstein was found unalived, said that Epstein hated Trump because he'd been kicked out. So Epstein had no love for Trump.
You know, we could do a 2-hour program just on this topic.
Yeah, we probably could. But the bottom line is that Epstein was blackmailing people for somebody. Trump's labor secretary during his first term, Alexander Acosta, was the U.S. attorney in Miami, who rather infamously offered a plea deal back in 2007 to Epstein. Yeah. And according to Acosta, now again, this is Acosta's word. This hasn't been corroborated by anyone as far as I know. We talked about this years ago. Reporter for Vanity Fair had written about this with Epstein, that Acosta was going to prosecute Epstein for procuring underage girls, trafficking, he was basically paid a visit by somebody who said, Epstein is above your pay grade. He belongs to intelligence. Those were Acosta's words. He belongs to intelligence. But it wasn't identified. Was it CIA, DI, Mossad? We don't know. There are those who say, oh, he was Mossad. Jews are evil.
No,
it's like, okay, look, I would say this about the accusation that he was Mossad. And I understand there's a connection there. Ghislaine Maxwell, her father, Robert Maxwell, was MI6.
Yeah.
But he also, back in 1946, saved Israel by using connections with a friend in Czechoslovakia to have the government of Czechoslovakia ship weapons to David Ben-Gurion in what was then Palestine so that the Zionists could defend themselves against the Arab militias and the Arab governments that were trying to overrun the Jews in what became Israel.
Yes, but I don't think that the swamp would protect him if...
That's my point. That's my point. If Epstein was truly working for Mossad and trying to compromise American politicians with connections to American business interests, they would have politely invited him to get the heck out of the country.
He'd have been gone long before he was.
Exactly right. I do not think that he was Mossad. Now, there are those, and I'll make this quick because it's only tangentially related. There are those who will look at, say Jonathan Pollard, who was spying for Israel. Read the book, The Secret War Against the Jews by John Loftus and Mark Ahrens. Not only does it go into the history, the 100-year history of the US and UK working against the Jews and Israel, they talk about Jonathan Pollard in some length. Pollard was an amateur. He was a U.S. Navy officer, had access to some information, but he was a Zionist and thought he was doing a good thing for Israel by sharing information with them. The reason Pollard was sent to prison in the United States and put in solitary confinement was not because he was spying for Israel. It's because he stumbled onto evidence of the illegal arms shipments from the United States to Iran, the Iran-Contra scandal that would have implicated George H.W. Bush as the vice president of the United States and those working for him, including Colonel Oliver North. Pollard got caught sending this information back to Israel, and they put him in prison. Now, why did it take so long for him to be sent back to Israel? Because the Mossad didn't want him. They didn't want this idiot amateur who was way over his head, messing up Israel's relationship with the United States. Mossad wants a good relationship with the CIA because Israel needs the United States to remain friendly.
Yes, just like they want a good relationship with MI6 and any other intelligence organization and the major players.
And people who look at Epstein or Jonathan Pollard and say this is evidence that the Mossad controls the United States, I'm sorry, you've got the tail wagging the dog. It's the other way around.
That is so true. And I told you this earlier. I really would be surprised if anything else is released regarding Epstein.
Yes.
I think that if there were more Epstein files, and there probably were, I think they're long gone.
Yep.
There may be a copy of them somewhere just in case somebody's little retirement guarantee.
Get out of prison free card.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. But I don't think the Trump administration is going to be allowed to see it. any more than I think the Trump administration will be allowed to see the true investigation behind the murders of RFK and JFK.
I agree. I agree.
And I know that RFK Jr. would love to know exactly what happened to his dad and to his uncle. Mm-hmm. But I'd be really surprised if the truth ever comes out on that.
I agree. I think that those files, if they ever existed, have long since been through a shredder, been burned, whatever. I don't think those things still exist anymore. Or again, if they do exist somewhere, somebody is holding them who Pam Bondi is not going to get to those.
No, I think the Epstein story is probably going to vanish pretty quickly here. But we also mentioned, and we're running out of time, we also mentioned that we were going to, at least I did, talking about redrawing the map in the Middle East. And you and I discussed this on an upcoming program for Unraveling Revelation. Yeah, that will be released on Monday, by the way, if you want to see that. I'm working on, I'll get the editing done later today. I was working on trying to find maps so I could actually show which lines are being redrawn. But Avi Lipkin he produces a weekly Zoom call with his analysis of what's going on in Israel and the Middle East. That's every Tuesday morning. Yeah, and if you watch it on your own, won't need us. Yeah. Avi will tell you everything. Join him on the Zoom call. You can do it live, 7 a.m. Central Time here in the U.S., but it gets recorded and then uploaded to Aaron Lipkin's YouTube channel later, so you can watch it later on. But I think the channel actually says Avi Lipkin on it now. That's where I watched it. You're right. It is the Avi Lipkin YouTube channel, so you can subscribe there and follow. Aaron has one too. But what we're seeing in the Middle East is really significant. Last Sunday night, Prime Minister Netanyahu told a graduating class of the IDF that Israel would not allow the military forces of the new Al-Qaeda-linked group that controls Damascus, HTS, to send its forces south of Damascus. That's huge. Yeah, because that's a big chunk of the southern part of Syria. But the Druze who are there, many of those communities, especially the ones along the Golan Heights, have asked to be annexed by Israel. Israel has forces inside Syria to create a buffer zone, and now Netanyahu is saying that buffer zone is basically everything up to Damascus. Right. The Muslim world is not all one tribe. It's really not. And not everybody that you assume is Muslim is Muslim. Right. So you've got the Druze, you've got the Kurds, you've got the Azeri, you've got the Turks, you've got the Arabs, you've got the Persians, Egyptians. And you've got some Christians in there as well, Arab Christians. I'm talking about in the entire Middle East. Right. Lots of tribes that don't necessarily get along. And the tribes within the Arab peoples are every bit as tribal as the ancient Israelites were. And Syria was an artificial construct. It was, after World War I. The Kurds got a raw deal after World War I. The Sykes-Picot Agreement of 1916, which divided up the map, which was then sort of reconfirmed in 1920 by the League of Nations and confirmation of the British Mandate, where the Brits controlled mainly the southern part of Mesopotamia. The French wound up with Syria, Lebanon, and parts of Turkey. The Italians got a chunk of southern Turkey. The Russians got Armenia. That's kind of how things were divided up. The Arabs were not entirely thrilled about this because they'd been promised an independent Arab state from, including all of what is now Syria, Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Israel. They were promised all of that. But at the same time, the Zionist movement was promised what is all of Israel and Jordan. And they've been fighting over this ever since 1920. The Kurds, who now have about 40 million people, now the Kurds are the descendants of the Medes. Oh. And we read about in the book of Daniel, Darius the Mede, or Darius. Interesting, yes. Yeah, the Kurds are the descendants of the Medes who come from the mountains of Iran. The Kurds have a big territory that extends from the mountains of Iran around to Antioch, basically, or Antakya, now in Turkey. It was essentially the same swath of territory controlled by the Hurrians in ancient Mesopotamia, who existed before the Medes, the Horites of the Bible. The Kurds wound up without a state, and they wound up with their territory divided between what is now Iran, Turkey, Iraq, and Syria. They are autonomous in
Iraq. They've got an autonomous zone there. In Syria, they control everything east of the Euphrates River. But the areas in Iran and southern Turkey and a little bit of Azerbaijan, those are the Azeris. The Azeris are Shia Muslims. According to Avi, the Kurds and the Azeris are pretty much pro-Israel. Mm-hmm. And since they already control everything east of the Euphrates, if Israel extends its protection over southern Syria up to the Euphrates, suddenly there would be a clear flight path from, say, Kirkuk, which is the biggest, or Mosul in northern Iraq, which are the biggest Kurdish-controlled cities, all the way through to the Mediterranean and the rest of the world. Whereas right now they've got to fly to the north, and the Russians are not really crazy about them flying through there. The south, the Iraqis don't want it. To the west, the Syrians, the Turks, they're landlocked, right? Another interesting development, this just popped up yesterday, is that the founder of the PKK, which is the Kurdish political movement, who the PKK is a terrorist organization according to the U.S. State Department. The Turks also call them terrorists. He, from his prison cell, has said to his fellows in the Turkish Kurdistan region, lay down your arms. Like, wait, what?
I know. This is big. There are so many things taking place worldwide. Trump wants peace in Ukraine. Trump wants peace in Israel and Gaza.
Right.
We're getting peace, it seems, in Syria. All of these things that have been traditionally ongoing wars and terrorist events seem to be changing.
Right.
Redrawing the map. But also leading prophetically to what?
Well, that's it. You're leading to a world where perhaps one person can bring it all together and say, look, I have brought peace to the world. Mm-hmm.
Now, it doesn't mean it's Trump.
Doesn't mean it's Trump.
I just want to say that, again, he is a very divisive individual. But it's very possible that someone else who may be involved in the background that we don't know about.
Yeah.
Or maybe even, who knows, a future religious world leader.
And here's the other thing. As Christians, it doesn't mean we should resist it, because we know that ultimately this leads to a one world government. We know that the technocratic movement, and yes, Elon Musk is a technocrat. His father was his grandfather was part of the technocracy movement of the 1930s, where they believed that engineers and bureaucrats are the only ones qualified to run everything for everybody. Here's your carbon credits, spend them wisely.
Which was a cousin to the eugenics movement.
Yes, it was. Doesn't mean we should oppose the drive for peace. It does mean that if and when the peace arrives, we take advantage of the reprieve to preach the gospel, making disciples of all nations and baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit.
Well said. Our commission is not to vote the next person into office. It is to lift up Jesus, not lift up a candidate, to lift up a Savior.
Yep. And that is what we are looking for. And if peace comes to the Middle East through the actions of Netanyahu or Trump or both, or another, again, Stan Deo, going back years now. I remember at that Denver conference for Prophecy Watchers where he said, Mohammed bin Salman, I think he's the one. Like, well, okay, this was before he was crown prince even.
I know.
Stan, pretty sharp.
He still is.
Don't know that I agree with him, but I think Mohammed bin Salman is a very interesting man, if nothing else, and a major player in the years to come in the Middle East.
Well, I've said it wouldn't surprise me if he steps up and says, you know what, I'll help rebuilding Gaza.
Yeah. And by the way, Trump's claim that we're going to own Gaza, it seems to be yielding results. The Egyptians are now prepared to present a plan.
He's totally playing them.
Yes.
He's saying, I'm going to go to the extreme. If you don't stop me, it's going to be all mine. And suddenly everybody's
clean your room by 3 o'clock, or we'll clean it for you, and we'll throw out the stuff that we don't think you need.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it is apparently bringing some results.
Just remember, we are part of a kingdom. Our King is the creator of all things. Our King is the Savior of all who want to call on His name and will call on His name. The window of opportunity is closing. And we need to be, first of all, not one of us knows that we have tomorrow promised. We don't.
Yep.
So our personal time may be limited and is limited, but the world's time is certainly limited.
Yeah. And the clock is running out.
Ticking.
Yeah. Well, I think those are the major issues for the week. I think there are other things out there that we could discuss, but we don't want to do a 2-hour show.
Well, tomorrow we will have, of course, Gilbert House Fellowship will be back again because Derek is no longer in Canada, as you have noticed, and we'll tell you all about the Canada trip tomorrow morning during that. And we will be celebrating communion.
That's right.
So if you don't have a church that you go to and you want to celebrate with us, please plan on joining us.
Yep. And tomorrow evening, View from the Bunker. My guest is Dr. Igal German, the founding director of the International Biblical Apologetics Association and the Yesod Bible Center in Chicago, Illinois, from whom you can online learn Hebrew. That was his first heard about him from Mike Heiser back in 2019. Mike met Igal at a conference and hit it off with him. And Mike posted to his website, hey, you want to check this out, online Hebrew course? So you got that. Very interesting because as a Messianic Jew, he's from Tiberias.
Beautiful area.
Yeah, and got his undergrad degree at the University of Haifa in Israel. He has a heart for biblical apologetics, for one, because he comes out of Jehovah's Witnesses. After he and his parents left Judaism, they were drawn into Jehovah's Witnesses.
Boy.
And then from there, actually, so wait a minute, they're teaching things that are not in the Bible. This is not what's in there. And so he accepted Yeshua as his Savior. So he's got a heart for apologetics, but especially apologetics and how to witness to our Jewish brothers and sisters. So I think very important mission. It's one of the reasons we love the ministry of Rabbi Zev Poret. So yeah, I think an important conversation tomorrow on A View from the Bunker.
Boy, there's always something to talk about.
Always is. And boy, if there's blather to be blathed, we will blather.
We will blathe it. And we're coming up on 20 years of blathering, March 5th, 20-year anniversary.
That is right, this coming week.
We've been trying to find our very first podcast, which was like 15 minutes long. We haven't found it yet, but if we do, we will post it.
Absolutely. Until next time, I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm Sharon Gilbert, and for Grace and Glory, who are in the front yard, probably digging holes. Bye-bye, everybody.
PID Radio is produced by Gilbert House and released under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License. Follow us online, Twitter @PID Radio, or the PID Radio page at Facebook. Join us each week for our online Bible study, the Gilbert House Fellowship, online at gilberthouse.org.